Hello, this is Alicia with Performentor, and today I'm here with Rebecca Corbin. She's the president and CEO of NACCE, which is the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship. And we're going to talk about one of our heuristics. Would you like to share anything else about yourself, Rebecca?
Well, I'm happy to be here today. I love the topic, and I like the place that you're coming from, not only, with your company, but I think the spirit of your book of really leaning into empathy and creativity. So I'm just excited to be part of the conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you. It's a real honor to have you. So the heuristic that we're going to talk about today, mostly anyway, unless we talk about others too, who knows, is what we don't know is always greater than what we do know, even though our brains often tell us that we think we've got it all covered. Well, the universe is a big place, and your brain's always fooling us into believing that we know more than we do. And so this is a great reminder, at least for me, to really stay curious and not get complacent. And so that's the heuristic. I was just curious kind of what your first reactions are to it.
Yeah, I love that one, because I think it's really the mystery of life. And the way I think the older that I've gotten, I like to look at life as an adventure. And I think if I look back in time when I was younger, a younger child or a younger professional or a younger mother, I wanted to know the future desperately, because I think I came from a place of, fear sometimes, because you don't know what the future has in store. And then I think when you really embrace kind of that curiosity of life, you think there's so much more to learn, and I think approaching life like that, which of course, professionally and really personally too, is kind of the role of an entrepreneur, right? You're always looking for problems to solve. So you're not really fearfully standing in the corner. You're kind of putting yourself out there, right? And saying, I was put on the planet for a reason, and maybe, you've spent decades trying to figure out what that is. And I think where I'm in a place right now is I feel pretty comfortable about what is my mission, what is my purpose. So I jump up every day. Not every day is a perfect day, but just to kind of approach it like, what am I supposed to do today? How can I make the world a better place with either the large or the small platform that I have is kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, you said something that, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but entrepreneurs are they're an unusual bird. They're kind of continual learners. I mean, they have to be, otherwise they wouldn't be able to be entrepreneurs. So I don't know, do you see it the same way?
I do. And I think once you get bitten by the bug of entrepreneurship, and I run a nonprofit. So NACCE is a 501c3 nonprofit, but interestingly enough, I have, part of my job is not only to be an educator and a trainer and a speaker, but to be a businesswoman, right? Because if we're not ending the year with a positive bottom line, we can't serve our colleges, we can't serve our people. So, several years ago, I had an experience at NACCE where I joined the organization. I was all excited. I don't have to be the development person, right? Raise all the money. I can be the president and CEO. And I sort of had a vision of what that would be like. Then I found out we had this huge funding gap. So we were about ready to lose about $400,000 of $1 million budget, which is scary as can be. And I never identified as an entrepreneur, and I had to really lean into that space. I was really uncomfortable with it at first, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I left a job at a college that I loved, people that I felt safe, my board cared about me. And then all of a sudden I'm on this national stage. I don't even know that many people, and this whole thing could fall apart. So long story short, just what you're talking about at the premise of this podcast is I had to put myself out there in really uncomfortable ways. Like I had to reach out to people that I knew, but I didn't know that well. And I had to sell NACCE as this, what it could be. It wasn't there yet, but like what we could provide, what we could do. And kind of long story short, this year, 7 years later, we'll end the year, our budget will be about $9 million. So we've not only been successful financially, but we've had this opportunity to make a huge impact in the country. And I'm excited about that. Had I not had that experience that was horrible, I mean, like I couldn't sleep. I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to lay off half the staff? What am I going to do? I don't think I would be the purpose-driven person that I am today. I think I probably would be more working from the sidelines. And it's certainly not all about me. It's all about the we, but the we is ultimately our students. And NACCE impacts over 4 million students. And these are students that sometimes don't have the best role models. They don't have parents, in some cases, that will pay for college. They are sometimes people that people have given up on. They could be people that have been involved in the prison system. They could be, have had issues in the past that they didn't know how to resolve, or they could just be really financially smart young people. But to me, I take that as a huge responsibility. And to the point that I made, Alicia, about the bug, like I would never go back. Like now, every once in a while, I get like a recruiter that contacts me and I'm like, nope, you don't even want to hire me now, because I couldn't live within the confines of a structure where I couldn't make change and I couldn't speak truth to things that are wrong. Like, that's just not who I am anymore. And I'm like really good with that. Like, I'm really happy at NACCE, but I'm like have a wonderful board of trustees that's now a very diversified board of trustees, which I'm really happy about. But I think it's a journey, and it's a reminder to me, even knowing a little bit about you and your business model, which I love, is, if you really don't know what your passion or purpose is, like get some entrepreneurial mindset training. Like you could be like me. You could be somebody who did very well and would show up and was like, tried to be the model employee most of the time. Or you can be a person that wants to change the world for the better. And that's what you wake up every day, and you literally cannot stop doing it. So
it's like what I'm wondering, because there seems to be this tight link between having to engage in reality as it is, which is constantly reminding us that what we don't know, and entrepreneurship. And I'm like wondering, it's very chicken and egg, right? Like what comes first? In your case, you stepped into something that you thought was one thing, and it ended up being like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't even know. I've got this big problem and I don't even know exactly how to solve it, but I'm going to do everything I can to do it. And that really puts you in that space where you're like super open. And I wonder, like, is it chicken and egg? I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do people just sort of like, I want to be an entrepreneur, and then they realize that, or is it always the other way around?
I think it can be both. I think there's some people that if you assess them, they're like a born entrepreneur. Like they're, 7 years old and they're hustling, selling newspapers and stuff like that. And then there's people like me that are probably more traditional type people that probably did have an entrepreneurial spirit, but it was a little bit kind of beaten out of me, not physically, but like, oh, no, that is not the path for you. Or, that is not something that will provide you with a safe, a sort of a safe journey. And I think the thing that I love about, being curious and, like you said, not understanding the whole story, like think of a movie that you might watch that's a mystery, and it's almost like your life could be sort of unfolding a certain way, and then some dramatic thing happens, like somebody dies or you lose a job, or some sort of social thing knocks everything out of whack. So you go from what you thought was your life to something that's completely different. So you have sort of that grief and that devastation, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know who to trust. But I think, sort of doing what you're doing in the conversation that we're having is saying, I've been thinking more recently about chaos theory, which I don't know if you know that much about that, but that there always is a divine order to things. I mean, animals, the way that animals will migrate and things like, there's sort of that idea that they will do things in geometric shapes. So it seems completely chaotic and messed up and scary. And I think the universe provides us, I think, with opportunities to sort of understand a bigger story, whether we want to have a small story or play a small role or play a bigger role or have kind of a combination of all of those things. I think thinking deeply about like the subjects that you're talking about is worthwhile, because in my view of the world and the way that I see community colleges and entrepreneurship and even human resources, the work that you do, is that every day is a new opportunity. So whether you're 16 years old or whether you're 61 years old, you still, as long as you have breath in your body and you have access to something, you have that opportunity to make your life what you want it to be. And it doesn't mean like, it's not like that rugged capitalist view. I don't mean it like that, but I mean, it's, you can choose to see assets in your life, even if they're things that are not great. Like you have people in your life that are struggling. I mean, but struggle is a necessary part of life, right? So what can you learn from that? How can we learn, those of us who are caretakers, to let other people struggle and to struggle ourselves? Because maybe that's part of trying to do what you're talking about, trying to understand, the order of the universe and trying to make sense out of things that sometimes, to be honest, don't make sense. And we won't be able to understand them until either mentally or spiritually we're ready to do it, or until we have a little bit further down the line and we can turn around and look back and say, oh my gosh, if I would have known how things would have turned out, I wouldn't have wasted so much time worrying about that. I would have just enjoyed the experience, right?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, my son got home and I hear him speaking too loudly.
Oh, that's okay. I don't hear him at all. So,
but I was thinking about, I guess there's so much that you said. I think that's where I'm sort of tripping up right now. I'm like, oh, what thread do I follow right now? But yeah, there's just something about, and that's our mission, right? To unleash people energy. And I say in and for small organizations, because small organizations feel like those are the ones that can change most readily. And I'm just not temperamentally equipped to deal with large corporate entity. But everyone wants to kind of, find who they are and be that best self that's, continually trying to, I guess, move or get better in a direction. And in many cases, entrepreneurship can be a way to do that. I know that, like you said, I mean, I was thinking of a client that was always going to be an entrepreneur, and here he is with a startup that's growing like crazy at age, I don't know if he's 27 or something now, I'm not even sure, but it's like, I'm like, wow, such clarity early on. Whereas I became an entrepreneur in my mid 40s. And I'm not even sure I would have been ready before then, right? So, I think one of the points that you're making is that, like, it's never too late.
that's right. It's never too early and it's never too late. And I think that to me is when I think about kind of, what you're talking about, that young man or even your son, getting home, I think entrepreneurial mindset and sort of embracing that we all have such agency and power, but sometimes traditional education chooses us or kind of leads us not to choose that or not to own that, even to have voice and to learn things, and to try to experiment with different things. Because when you think about it this way, so you started your firm, in the mid 40s, what if it didn't work out? I mean, if you're not putting your house on the market to support it, it's kind of a small risk, right? I mean, you could always go back to work for a small or medium-sized company, but if you don't try, you'll never know. And that's kind of the place, that I think about a lot, is how can we help people kind of identify what they are good at. One of the things when I worked at a college in New Jersey, I used to oversee career services, which is really interesting to me because it goes to your point of sort of fit. And to me, I think, all human beings have value and they have gifts, but, sometimes you can truly get the wrong person in a job. And that's hard because it's not good for them and it's not good for the organization. So how do you try to figure out, can you tweak the job? Can you help the person? I see the work that you do is helping organizations like mine. We don't have enough staff to have a full-time HR director, but we're growing. We have 11 full-time staff. We're going to be hiring more people. So we can't just operate like we're a 1 or 2 person organization. We have to have some structure around it. But to your point too, I was thinking about the person that hired me and one of my mentors, Dr. Ed Massey, who is the president of Indian River State College in New Jersey. I interviewed him for a podcast a few months ago. And he was just said, he'd worked for the college for like 45 years. And he said, one of the key takeaways is people don't want to be fixed. Like if they said, Becky, I want you to sit quietly at your desk and don't leave your desk, don't try to do all these new innovative things. Like, I don't want to be fixed. I don't want to be that kind of a person. And I think the mistake a lot of managers make is they want to try to box people into certain things. And so I think the value, kind of the topic that you're talking about, and I think overall in human resources, is how can we get people to better understand themselves so that they can better identify what is a good opportunity for me. Because even though I identified NACCE was a fantastic opportunity, then I started doing it and then I questioned, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? It was still a wonderful opportunity. I just needed to give myself more time, and I needed the support of my board, and I needed like another 6 to 8 months to try to make it work. Because sometimes people, they'll either give up too early or we get people in the wrong spots. So I think that's when I think of the work, Alicia, that you do, and some of the pathetic underpinnings and how you connect to art. I mean, that just really resonates with me, because I think it's not science in the respect that, we'll do an assessment and, this is the perfect place for this person. We can have indicators, but, we're human beings. And sometimes it's not always that clean, whether we're at the beginning stages, the middle stages, or the ending stages of an employee-employer relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these heuristics, including this one, comes from, they're all reframes. Like, how do we recast or reframe what we're dealing with? Because I've had a few clients share with me, like, I think differently about my business. I think differently about my people. I think differently about HR in ways that I could not explain prior to working with you and with Performentor. And I think, well, how can I help? Like, what is there? What's the difference? Like, is there? And I think it's just a lot of reframing and rethinking our assumptions. And so that's what these heuristics actually come from. Is just, rather than this old style top-down mechanistic view, is being people-centered, not people-centered in a way that's like easy on people, but matches people to, roll to their capability. And thinking differently means that we have to be open to the very real possibility that there's a lot in the world that we don't know, and that first solution that we come up with might be the wrong one because we've just shortchanged our diagnosis. Because another one of my heuristics, like, diagnose before you prescribe.
Yeah, I love what you said. And I really believe that too, in terms of reframing. And even in education, one of my favorite just friends over the years, a teacher, she used to teach children with special needs and gifted children in kind of the same way. And because if you look at a child that has special needs, you might only focus in on what's missing or what's atypical for what you could expect. And it's kind of the same thing with children who are gifted, except they may have a higher IQ, they may have some gifted abilities that others don't have, but the way that you teach them is much more humanistic, because you're not saying, okay, this is the way that sort of the majority of children learn. It's kind of acknowledging in a way that their gifts and talents are different, whether they're struggles or whether they're opportunities, and sometimes a combination of that. And so I think what you're talking about is reframing, and that's a lot of what we do in entrepreneurship is, oftentimes your first venture, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, is not a success. It's not, because you have to learn things, you have to gather data. And so a lot of what we do with training and some of the tools and things that we have is to say, how can somebody fail fast, right? So that they're not dumping all of their savings and their reputation and everything into something, but how can they kind of do a little prototype or get some kind of indicators? And so what I'm excited about the work that NACI is doing with your firm, which I'm really excited about into the future, is as we continue to expand and grow, one of the things that's really important to me is cultural fit at NACI, because we're not, I mean, obviously I'm not a traditional CEO. I think about things differently. I would much rather people fail at something than not to try. I mean, that drives me crazy when people take no initiative, and my staff will tell you that. I'm like, sometimes if everything is just flying around, you just try something, just do something. And if you do it in a spirit of good intention and you are trying to collaborate with others, like people in NACI, they don't get in trouble for failing. I mean, if you're not failing to some degree, you're not trying hard enough. That's not a consistent culture really around. And so it's how do we find people like that? And I'm not just looking for somebody who has an MBA or somebody who has written 3 strategic plans. Like, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people that just love the opportunity to serve. They want to create things that didn't exist before. We want somebody with an entrepreneurial spirit, but something like my mentor, Ed Massey, who I talked to you about, is like a hunting dog, right? That was his analogy. Like, what does a hunting dog do? It's just driven to the end targets, and it will not violate the rules, but it will go up and over and jump and climb and do everything that it can in the spirit of the hunt to be part of that team. And so I feel like the work that you're doing, the work that NACI is doing, we can't find those people necessarily by themselves, because I know, being a reflective leader, one of the deficits that I have is I see immense potential in everyone. I mean, literally everyone. Mm-hmm. So it makes it easier for me to make a really bad hiring decision, because all I need to do is for somebody to say, oh, I've always wanted to, XYZ, change the world for this reason. And I'm just like, oh my God, that is our person. That is our person. We can shape and mold and I know that that's my deficit. So people like me need people like you who can say, okay, well, let's just slow down a little bit. Let's do a background check and make sure that everything checks out.
Let's see about follow through. Let's see about the other parts of the success formula. Yeah.
And sometimes that works. I mean, we're intuitive, right? But a lot of times it doesn't work. And then you're stuck with, I just saw this immense opportunity and it's not unfolding the way that I thought it was. Or you get people, quite honestly, that interview really well. Those are the people that have a new job every 2 years. And you're like, how in the world do you get all these amazing jobs? And you literally don't follow through on anything because, you fall in love with the interviewee that checks all the boxes and knows how to do that. So I just think, Alicia, the work that you're doing, and I think having these conversations where we can think about, the resources and opportunities that we have as leaders together to find like-minded people, and how might we help each other? I shared a deficit that I had, so you have an asset that I don't have. The other thing that you guys do that meets my needs is I don't want to hire a full-time HR person because I don't want to be living in that HR space. That just feels like I understand the value of it. I'd much rather have somebody sort of on call that I can, learn from and make sure that we're following regulations, but hope that we don't have huge turnover. And some of the things when I worked at the college, that, lawsuits and all kinds of stuff that bigger institutions, just by their nature, sometimes come in contact with.
Yeah, I hear in your description of the culture, or the part of the culture that you want to amplify is an ability to say, hey, you know what? How do we do X? I don't know, but let's try this, and let's try this in a way where we learn. And you can't ask that question if you're if it's you're so tied into having to be right or pretend like you have all the answers, and that can be hard for some people.
Well, it is. And I mean, I invested in getting a business coach. It was one of the best investments I made. It was a really deep learning experience for me. I mean, he asked me challenging questions, and the one thing, his name is Bill, that resonated with me is he'd ask me questions like, what's the most important quality of an employee? And like, think about that, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of them. He's like, nope, there's really one that's the most important. And like, of course, I wanted him to tell me what it was, because I was like, and I agree with him. He said, in his opinion, and I agree with this, the most important quality is one of integrity. If you don't have integrity, you don't have anything, because you can't have trust. That is a core thing. And how do you find that? You look at past behavior, you look at, a lot of indicators, but I think, to your point about culture, I think there's aspirational culture. And then as organizations change, like as NACCE is growing, when we just had a couple of people, our culture was different. Like we were just trying to be a good association, educational association. Now we're trying to be a great transformative educational association. And what does that mean? It means when we get the opportunity to advise the White House or one of their, initiatives, that we raise our hand and say yes, even though it's really scary, because we're like, we think we know our stuff, but there are a lot of things we don't know, but we are going to lean in and we're going to do our best, but we're also going to lead with integrity. And that to me is one of the most important qualities. And I think when you see in organizations, as sometimes happens, when you see that there's a deficit there, I don't think you can fix that. I think you have to address it somehow. But, those are the kind of questions that I, to be honest, didn't think about 5 years ago. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about that. I thought more about goals and, how I was going to do X, Y, Z, or I had to get this done. And I'm trying to spend my time now thinking about, how can I build this culture, preserve this culture, and as we have more success, not lose that culture, because authenticity demands that, you look in the mirror and there's some things that we all need to work on and improve upon. And you're in a much better place, I think, to be a better leader if you acknowledge those things about yourself. You don't have to put them all out there, but to say, this is not my greatest strength. And how can I account for that? Because, we are the people that we are. So, I'd rather spend my time doing the things that I am good at, but it requires support. And I think that's where you come in. And I'm so happy that our paths crossed. I don't know if you would mind, I could tell that quick story about how we got connected through sort of a fun opportunity. You came to our grand opening and had someone reach out to you about doing some design thinking, which is something that we love doing. And so I feel like you sort of took a chance on us, connecting us with your client. And we had a wonderful time with one of your clients doing kind of design thinking, trying to bring people together. And it informed us in a way that we wondered if what we use in higher ed would work in a business, like a traditional business setting, and could we effectively facilitate that? So it was kind of a deep look at that question, and I enjoyed that experience a lot.
You did it during COVID.
During COVID, right? That's right. We were in a garage, right? A car garage outside. So that was a good COVID memory. It was, yeah. But what a weird time that we're living through, right?
Well, it made a huge impact. So speaking of cultures where, and that's what part of the president was trying to accomplish is how do I make it easier, and I think design thinking provided a structure by which people could be more playful and ideate more without worrying about giving the wrong answer. And so I have to say that, it sounds like it's going very well. They've got that process going. They've got a committee. It's not even being run by
I'm so glad to hear that.
The same person. And it really sounds like it's really opened up the doors to people sharing more ideas. Whereas before they were reticent, like, I don't want to give the wrong answer and look stupid or
which
have a bad idea.
Is human nature. You look at how kids are in kindergarten and first grade, your own children and mine, like they can't get close to it. Like if you've ever done the story time reading, like they just like want to be so close to you and they just soak up everything that you have. And then, for lots of reasons, somewhere down the line, I don't know, middle school years set in and we lose that. And I think that's part of our job, and part of, I think, even my own personal mission in life is like, how can we inject more joy into the situation? Because I am a firm believer, if you're having fun and you're playing and you're joyful, your results are going to be better. And that's not the only reason to do it, but if you're going to do something, why not do it well? Why not laugh? Why not have fun? Why not surround yourself with people that are willing to kind of put themselves out there and be serious when you need to be serious and have serious conversations. But when it doesn't need to be that serious or that structured, a little lighthearted fun, goes a whole long way, especially, during COVID, because we all read these articles, but I don't think you can understate it enough how devastating this has been on people in general. They feel disconnected. People are not as healthy as they used to be. Even us going to a national conference, I was so exhausted getting back because I was so unaccustomed to, I was more accustomed to engaging in the format that we are here. Like, we're talking virtually and we become more comfortable with that. But when you're having deep conversations with people, and I felt very much like people were much more willing to open up, challenges that they had with their children or just things that happened. I don't remember any other time in my life where I've probably had as many deep conversations about shared things that even my own family, has struggled with, that normally I wouldn't share those things. I would just, I don't want to ever burden anybody else with my own issues, but it felt good in a way, because they were safe spaces where you felt like, okay, I hear you, that you're struggling and we're struggling too. We're making our way through it. But that's my hope, is that, post-pandemic, which hopefully will be sooner than later, that we don't lose that connection to each other. And I think that's a lot of the work that I've seen in some of the materials that you've shared, and sort of the spirit of your company, because there is this big transition. We have to come back, and at some point we can't be hunkered down forever either. That's not good for the economy. It's not good for all the people in those industries. And that's why we sort of decided to lean in and have a hybrid conference, because we know, that certainly there are people that want to meet in person, but there's industries and people that are depending on that, and if we can do it safely, let's lean in and let's do it, and try to help our neighbors where we can.
Yeah, that's the human condition. We want to connect, even hermits.
Yes.
I think maybe there's a few people out there that don't want to be around other people, but I have my doubts that they don't at all want to be around other people.
Maybe just not as much, and but yeah, I'm with you. I think the majority of people, they miss that. And I think they know when they can connect with a culture that embraces them. And so that's kind of what we try to do at NACCE too, is not be all things to all people. Not everybody likes this. Like, some people don't like it. They're like, yeah, I don't know. It's not for me. And that's okay. We don't go after everyone. We want to go after the early adopters and what we call the movable middle. Those are the people that are kind of hanging out in the spaces in between. They might be the clock punchers and they're not super engaged, but if they can get some self-confidence, if they can get some connections, we feel like they can do a better job, whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're a teacher or a leader or a student, and then that's where you make your impact, is not chasing after the people that just, they don't get you or they're not interested. Like, we just say, we're here if you ever want us, but we're not going to waste a lot of energy, trying to convert you onto kind of a different way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I enjoy the conversation, and I appreciate you so much and the work that you're doing. And I'm glad that we can collaborate and we can help each other. And I look forward to many more conversations with you. And just know NACCE's here in Cary, North Carolina. You know where we are. You were here at the opening. So right. Just if there's anything we can ever do for you, we're happy to be a sounding board or collaborator in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I'm just a few miles away. Just on the
yes,
other side
that's
of
right. That's right. Sounds good.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. I will be sure to get your information and in whatever footnotes and the different places that we get this uploaded. But thank you for being my number one.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.